Hello and welcome back to Bible, Brats, and Brew. This is part 2 of Exodus 15:22 through chapter 18. We're going to finish out here, chapter 17, chapter 18. We're going to talk a little bit about some main points, some main themes, and what's going on, and then we're going to give you our thoughts and opinions on the brats and brew that we ate and that we drank. So we thank you again for listening in on part 2. And one more mention that today's episode is also sponsored by Napa Auto Parts of Minot. So we thank you for being a sponsor for us. And we hope you enjoy what we have to say. And thank you so much for your sponsorship. All right, going through chapter 17, we ended with a couple points leading up into chapter 17. We're going to see the water and the rock. We're going to see a fight, and then we're going to see some more stuff leading into chapter 18. So what we got, some main things going on for chapter 17 is God's provision and protection again. We see God's roles as a deliverer and provider and a protector for the Israelites. And one of the main things is the dependence on God from the Israelites. So those are just a couple little tidbits. I mean, there's so much more in chapter 17 than just that, but those are some takeaways real quick while we get into this that we want you to think about while we're reading through chapter 17. So, Brandon, you wanna start
I'll
out?
Take it away. So,
thank you, Brandon.
Chapter 17, verse 1. Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at that location. Then there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" For the people thirst there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why now have you brought us from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do to these people? A little more, and they will stone me." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take them in your hand and your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he named the place Massah and Meribah, because of the quarreling of the sons of Israel, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So, now the big picture is it's almost like a verbatim repeat of like the episode of 15. In 15 there was bitter water, the water they couldn't drink. Here they're thirsty. They left the wilderness of Sin, which sin is not in reference to the English word sin, it's just the name of the location. They went there. They're now traveling down to Mount Sinai, and they are in need of water. And so the people are beginning to complain. They're demanding to get water. And they are getting to the point that they're so angry and so upset that Moses is in fearing for his life, that they are going to respond with stoning him, to executing him, blaming him for all of their troubles. And so Moses has been presented with this leadership role right from chapter 15. It talked about how Moses led them out. And the people are willing to execute their leader because they have so little trust that the God that provided them for water previously is not going to provide water again. They are having daily showers of manna. Bread is falling from the sky, and yet they are struggling to really respond to God in a way of trust and responsibility and with that. And so the place will end up being named Quarreling because they are testing God. God was giving them an opportunity to grow their faith and to deepen it, to reflect on their own actions and to see that God is providing for them and can be trusted with that provision. And so that now they're testing God to the point that that's really concerning. And so they are told, Moses is told to bring some of the elders of Israel, and they go out to a rock at Horeb. Now, Horeb means dry and desolate. So this is like they're going to the driest place to do this miracle.
Right.
They strike this rock, and water appears for the people to drink. So up through this point, they have been not a lot of consequences for Israel's disbelief, and we're going to see that in later parts of the Bible. Well, I guess we won't be covering it, but a lot of it in Numbers and Deuteronomy. We're going to see that there is going to be some natural consequences to their actions, as God stated previously in chapter 15. That there is this, if you trust in him, there's going to be that healer. I am your healer, I am your protector, I'm your deliverer, and I'm your provider. And so they're wrestling with that. They're not understanding their new life, because their old life, this bitter life, that they were slaves of sin and slaves of this world, they're now to be servants of God, and they have to learn how to do that, and they have to be trained how to do that. And right now they're resisting any sort of teaching, whether actual like preaching or in these cases like these practical tests, this pragmatic day-to-day, I saw God do all these miracles, am I willing to trust him in these small things in my life, trust him for provision, because they already knew that they're going to this promised land, that they were promised that God will be with them to defeat the enemies of this promised land, and yet they are heading this direction under this promise that God is going to do these big things, yet they don't trust God for these little things. Mm-hmm. And so that is water coming from the rock, part 2, the sequel. So what are your thoughts?
Boy, there is so much going on. I mean, already in this. My thoughts on this is how easy it is when you have something provided to you that you can just forget about it. Like, just let it go. That's it. You can have all the help in the world, and all of a sudden it means nothing to you. And I mean, to be honest with you, I've been a person in my past that actually did that. I can have water provided to me and then completely forget where it come from and why, and then take it for granted. So, that's just a straight up confession right there. But, in my past, I've been like that. So I get where they're coming from. There's a lot going on. What, I shouldn't even say what, that's really my main thought is, because later on they're still going to forget about this, and there's quarrels and all that stuff. But how often do we forget about the blessing when we're provided for, and then all of a sudden we want more and more and more and more, that's really my thoughts is like, we sometimes in our modern society, we kind of look just like the Israelites, if that makes sense to you, or anybody else. There's just so much going on that is a difference and a similarity at the same time between cultures. And it's really unique to see that. And then the other thing, too, one other thing, with the whole water in the rock. If I saw water come out of a rock just shoot up and out, I think I'd panic a little bit. But that's a whole different topic.
I'm not sure it was a geyser, but
it's a whole different topic. I mean, I might panic a little bit because I really don't know what it looked like. I mean, if it trickled out, that's one thing. But if it shot out like a geyser, yeah.
Well, I mean, it was enough water for the thousands of Israelites there. So maybe it was a geyser shooting out. Who knows?
Who knows?
All right. Well, you want to start reading verse 8?
Yep. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel and Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." And Joshua did as Moses told him, and fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hand, that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this in a book as a memorial, and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and named it, The Lord is my banner. And he said, the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation. That's pretty heavy. What's your thoughts on that one?
All right. Well, this is going to be the first of 2 episodes. So with the previous 3, they were all about Israel not trusting in this daily provision. There was the bitter water, followed by the not enough food, followed by just no water. And so now we're going to meet 2 entities. This first is they're coming to assault them. These Elimelechs, they are seeing that this very large body of Israelites are walking in the desert. They're walking from wilderness to wilderness, so they're not traveling these like towns or coastal areas. And so as a result of that, they're really vulnerable to attack. And so they're probably trying to take advantage of that. They see that, and so Moses responds. He reaches out to Joshua. And so here we're going to see Joshua for the very first time. We see that Moses turns to him. So clearly Joshua is someone that's already been established as someone that's trustworthy, that has leadership skills, maybe military prowess. And so he goes and says, Joshua, you lead the attack. And so, but it's not the strength of the Israelites that are going to prevail in this battle. There was already previously mentioned that they're not militarily equipped at all. They are like sitting ducks. They're civilians. They have some treasure with them, but they don't have like armies. They don't have all these armaments that they would need to defeat an enemy. And so they're sitting ducks. They're prime targets. And so they have no earthly reason they would win this fight. But rather, it's because of God's power. And that's demonstrated in that when Moses was lifting up his staff, they were victorious. But if he set it down, his arms got tired. He would lower it, and then the enemies would prevail. And so it ended up being like this bench pressing contest of like, how do you keep this above my head? And Aaron and Hur ended up coming to spot him in a sense, like holding up his hands to make sure that the staff remains up so that they could win this battle. And that just demonstrates very clearly that it was God who won this battle, not the Israelites. And that was very clear to them and clear to us here today. And so we have this battle that God won and fought for them, and God promised that He would remember these nomads or semi-nomads who went out to attack innocent civilians in their hour of need in the wilderness when they're weak, and that God would remember that and would repay them with justice. So
awesome. Yeah, it's all great takeaways from that. I mean, you couldn't summarize that any better. You want to start out chapter 18 here?
All right. So this is going to be the second of 2 encounters. So the first one with these enemies, they were trying to take advantage of the weakened Israel. Now we're going to have a visitor who is quite the opposite. That's going to be a blessing to them. So it says, now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people. Now the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife Zipporah after he had sent her away, and her 2 sons, of whom one of them was named Gershom, for he said, I am a sojourner in a foreign land, and the other was named Eliezer. As he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he camped at the Mount of God. So all this to say, Jethro brought back Moses' family. It did mention previously that Moses' family had went down with Egypt with them, but it seems clear that they were sent back, probably because it wasn't safe for Moses' family, in that both the Israelites and the Egyptians were upset with him during that time. And so there's a family reunion, and then we're going to see Jethro is going to be making two different sort of like comments or observations that we can point out to. So why don't you take it away, Greg, at verse 6.
Sure. And he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons with her. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh, and to take the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on the journey, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it was proven when they dealt proudly against the people. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses, father-in-law, before God.
All right. So here we have this first like observation that Jethro hears. And so Jethro hears about all of the exploits, and we see him respond how the Israelites should be responding. He recognizes the goodness that God has, that he has delivered them, that he brought the salvation, that God is to be blessed and worshipped. He brought burnt offerings and sacrifices. He has this open hearted response, seeing what God has done, and that touched his heart, and he reflectively worshipped as a result. And so this is sort of a response that we would ideally see in the Israelites. And so it's a little ironic that this foreigner is the one that responds with this faith and this understanding. And so throughout this whole next portion of Exodus, we're going to see this emphasis on knowing God, that they need to understand who God is in order for them to have this relationship. Because all the way back from the very first episode of the podcast, we talked about how Exodus had such a huge theme of the identity of these people. Who are the Israelites? And the Israelites' identity is tied up in what their relationship with God is, who God is. And so by understanding that God is the provider and that they are beloved children, that they understand that they are to obey him in this like fatherly, childly way, this is pouring into their identity. And so Jethro is a demonstration, an example of how the Israelites should be responding. And there's a couple of things that are like pretty noteworthy. And so Jethro is this priest of Midian. We don't know what religious system that he'd be representing, but he sees God's power, and he says that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed proven when he dealt proudly against the people. And so it's very clear that Jethro is honoring God as supreme. And so what are your takeaways?
Boy, there's a lot. I'm surprised that Moses got along with his father-in-law that great. There's a lot of tension going on here, for the most part.
Oh, what do you mean tension?
So by tension, I would look at it like a guitar string or a violin string. If it's too loose, it doesn't produce a sound, but if it's too tight, it snaps. But they seem to be right at the point where they're working together to look towards understanding with one another, even though there's hardship all around them. So there's tension between both of them because each one's going to have a different perspective. They're going to have a different visual of what they're taking in. But it seems that that tension is still aligning with wanting to bless people and see God's favor and God's blessing. Now, we can't judge the hearts of both of them, but the tension I'm talking about is the tension that we find ourselves in as believers today, where we're constantly fighting the battles of the head. But even during this time, the tension is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. A lot of times when we talk about tension, people think that it could be a bad thing or a negative thing, but really tension's a good thing for the most part. So I see that the tension is what it's driving them forward. It's giving them meaning and hope. And the other thing I want to talk about too, real quick, if I can mention this, Brandon, is that in that tension, I almost forgot about this, but it just came to me. The importance of delegation. So when I was thinking about that, I was like, man, I'm missing something really important. But the importance of delegation, because we're going to see that coming up here in a little bit. But
yeah, let's go ahead and read verse 13 and cover some of that.
Sure. You want me to read it or you want to do it?
You can go for it.
Okay. And it came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. Now when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor and make known the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you. For the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I shall give you counsel, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God, and you bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes of the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk, and the work they are to do. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times, and let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all the people also will go to their place in peace." So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, leaders of thousands and of hundreds, of fifties and of tens. And they judged the people at all times the difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way into his own land.
All right, so I couldn't imagine how Moses was doing it previously. That seems super inefficient, in that, like, there's these thousands of people, and that every dispute was being brought before him. And so, like, there might be, like, this murder trial, followed by, like, hey, he crosses my property line. He stole my flower or whatever. Like, the idea that, like, there's no, like, overarching structure, hierarchy to, like, divide up the labor. Man, Moses is going to burn himself out so quick. I can't even imagine how I'd be tired after an hour.
See, this is that tension I was talking about. Like, it's good tension, but it can be bad at the same time. But yeah, I don't know how he did it.
No,
how
well,
he could have done it without
Jethro was like,
delegating,
you
right?
can't do this anymore. So yeah, he just gave him advice in that, like, hey, your primary responsibility is that you are representing the people before God, and you're bringing their disputes to God. And
Right.
so there's that priestly element in that he is presenting them to God, and then there's that prophetic element of that he is teaching God's word and laws to them, and so that emphasizes this emphasis on this theme of knowing God. That he needs
Right.
to be actively teaching them, because so far they have not picked up as they've been learning. They have been failing the tests. They need to have
All
a
the time.
teacher. They need to have a teacher that's like in the ranks with them, teaching them how they to live, because this is a new way of living, and they're not adjusting well. And so
Right.
Moses' job is to represent the people before God, and to teach God and to show them the new way of living that they're meant to do. And because of that, he can't be handling all these small issues. That these are other people can be tasked to do that, and that this
Right.
can be a team effort to bring the community before God and to grow in God. Because if you're trying to do it solo, you're going to burn yourself out, and the people are going to be burnt out.
Right.
And so the ultimate aspect is this isn't an individual process. This is a communal process. That growth as a community is the responsibility of the community, not just a single figurehead, whether that's a priest or a pastor. That this is a communal effort, that we are to encourage one another and to focus on one another. And so there is now going to be these officers of a judicial system that are going to be able to handle these issues of men's of tens and hundreds of thousands. That there's going to be people that are going to be trustworthy, that they're going to be honest, that they're not going to be able to be bribed, and they're going to be able to handle these civil issues. So that way, when there's a big dispute or a complex dispute, Moses can bring it before God, but they're otherwise handling it as a community. And so I think that that's really interesting and really exciting. So Jethro gave some good advice, and Moses followed it.
He did it. And actually, that's a perfect example of what real discipleship looks like too. Follow me as I teach you. So that's a good thing. Well, we got a few minutes left here, Brandon. Tell me your real thoughts on that root beer and that brat.
Well, how many minutes do we have here?
We got about 3.5.
Oh, okay. We didn't have a lot of time.
No.
Well, before I talk about the root beer, I do want to just emphasize some of the takeaways. I think that the biggest thing in those first 3 episodes is there that trust of God, and that this is a process that God is working with his people to encourage them and to lead them into this way of obedience. And so there's that expectation for them to grow. And so they are repeatedly making these decisions, but they need to trust in God. But I guess I can't talk anymore about that. I'm getting the signal to shut up. So Doublin, Texas root beer. We talked about bitter waters. This is not one of the sweet root beers. There's been basically 2 classes of root beers. There's been the sweet and kind of like the rougher bitter stuff. And I've discovered I'm more of a sweet person. Doublin, Texas. It's made with pure cane sugar, but it was a little bitter. It leaned on that end of it. So it's not bad, but it was not my favorite.
You'd think for cane sugar it'd be a little sweeter. So
yeah.
What did you think of the brat?
The brat was really good. The brat was it's probably one of the tastiest. We've had a couple like really downers, and we had a bad show of it. The previous one, I ate a bite and was like, and then I ate another bite, and I actually just threw the rest of it away.
Me too.
This one in particular was really good. I liked the meat. I liked the tension of it.
It was all good.
It was really good except for 2 problems. It said pepper jack and it said smoked. I didn't really get a lot of smoked flavor from it, and the pepper jack, the cheese was really good, but I would not have known it was pepper jack.
No, I didn't say anything about it didn't taste like pepper jack.
It just felt like normal cheese, like a cheddar or something. So labeling is misleading, but the meat itself was really good.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I had a Dale's Pale Ale. Same thing, bitter. It Definitely not my thing. I don't like too bitter. Yeah. I mean, it's good.
You gotta throw a log in it.
But yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's too bitter.
Throw a little tree in there. Let's sweeten it up.
A palm. So yeah, I kind of have the same feeling as you have on the root beer for what I had tonight. And I'm in agreement with you on the brat. So yeah, good times. Most important is scripture and the truth of God's word. And the secondary things is the brats and the brew. Thank you again for listening in on Bible, Brats and Brew, Part 2, with your hosts, Brandon and Greg. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, and learning a little bit more about Scripture, deepening your relationship with the Lord, and a little bit about what we thought about the Brats and the Brew. Thank you again for joining in. See you next time.